A lost ticket, a snowy sidewalk, and a poor girl who had no idea her small act of kindness would unravel a secret hidden for over a decade. Brenda Strong didn't mean to get involved. She just wanted to return what wasn't hers. But when she handed the ticket to a boy clutching a matching drawing, she didn't expect the man standing beside him to go completely still. She didn't know his name. She didn't know he was one of the wealthiest men in the city. And she definitely didn't know the drawing on the back of the ticket had been made by someone he'd lost and never truly let go. What started as a forgotten object became a doorway to healing, redemption, and something deeper than either of them expected. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Brenda Strong didn't usually stop on her walk home, especially not in the middle of a snowstorm, when the bus had broken down 3 blocks earlier and her thrift store boots had already soaked through. But something caught her eye. A pale rectangle against the gray slush just outside the city pavilion's entrance. Not trash, not a receipt, something sturdier, glossy, a ticket. She bent down, brushing snow from its surface. The front read, Winterlight Gala, private entry, booth number 9 reserved. The date was tonight. Her fingers, red from cold, flipped it over. That's when she paused. On the back was a drawing. A child's sketch, maybe, though unlike anything Brenda's little sister ever made. There was a bird round and smiling, perched on a snowy fence, wearing a crooked crown. Below it, in small but careful handwriting, Don't forget the warm. JM. She didn't know why, but her breath caught. Brenda had always believed in signs. Not the flashy, in-your-face kind. The quiet ones. The ones that found you when you weren't looking for anything. She tucked the ticket into her pocket and glanced up at the glowing glass building in front of her. She wasn't dressed for galas. She wasn't even dressed for walking past them. But something told her she needed to return it. She crossed the street, her coat too thin, the snow crunching under her feet. The city pavilion was hosting something expensive tonight. Frosted glass windows, music leaking through, and people dressed like magazine ads. Brenda kept her head low and walked toward the side entrance, hoping to find a service desk or someone collecting coats. No luck. The woman at the front looked too busy, and Brenda didn't want to be mistaken for someone trying to sneak in. So she stood by the far wall, awkwardly, near the heater vent, watching the guests flow through the lobby like streams of silk. That's when she saw him. A boy, no older than 9, maybe 10. Hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands, standing stiffly by the information booth, holding something in his hands. It was another drawing. Pigeon. This one flying above rooftops with a scarf. Brenda's heart tripped. She took a breath and stepped forward. "Hey," she said softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "That's a cool pigeon." He looked at her, startled. Not fearful, just surprised. No badge, no gown. Just a girl with messy hair and salt stains on her boots. "My sister draws pigeons like that," she added, pulling the folded ticket from her pocket. "Actually, I found this outside. Is this yours?" The boy's eyes widened. That's my aunt's drawing." Brenda blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "My uncle had it in his pocket. He always carries one." Before she could reply, a tall man approached from behind. Dark coat, calm stride, watchful eyes. The kind of man whose presence made people move aside without him asking. The boy turned to him. "Uncle Jesse." She found the ticket. Brenda stood up quickly. "Sorry, I wasn't trying to cause any trouble. I just..." But the man wasn't listening to her words. His gaze was locked on the ticket in her hand, then on the drawing. His expression changed so subtly, she might have missed it if she hadn't been watching. A slight twitch in his jaw, a soft inhale, and something else, too. A flicker of memory so sharp it made him look suddenly younger. He took the ticket from her hand slowly, reverently, as though she had just handed him something more sacred than paper. "Where did you find this?" he asked, voice low. "In the snow," Brenda answered honestly. "Just outside the tram stop. It caught my eye." The man nodded once. Then silence stretched between them. Brenda shifted her weight, ready to step away. "I'm glad it found you," she said gently. "The drawing on the back. It's beautiful." She turned to leave, but the boy tugged her sleeve again. "Wait, what's your name?" "Brenda." "Brenda?" the man repeated, as if trying to place her. But of course he wouldn't be able to. She was no one to him, just a poor girl with cold fingers and a habit of noticing small things. "Thank you," he said finally. Brenda nodded and stepped back into the cold. But she didn't know that inside his chest, Jesse Metcalf felt something shift. It had been 10 years since he'd seen that phrase, "Don't forget the warm." 10 years since he'd buried the only family member who used to say it to him on snowy days like this. And now a stranger, a girl with nothing, had returned it to him in the form of a lost ticket and a drawing he'd sworn never to part with. He looked down at the sketch again, feeling the snow still clinging to its edges. And in the background, his nephew Max whispered, "She talked to me like a normal person." That night, Brenda walked back to her apartment with frozen toes and a strange ache in her chest she couldn't name. She didn't expect anything to come of it. She just returned what wasn't hers. But in a building filled with curated smiles and shallow conversations, hers had been the only real voice that night. And the man she gave the ticket to? He wasn't done with her. Not yet. The ticket never left Jesse Metcalf's desk. He didn't tuck it into a drawer, didn't press it back into his wallet. He set it gently beside his late sister's photo, a habit he hadn't kept up in years, and just sat there for a long time, staring at the childlike bird sketch, the crown, the uneven snowflakes, the phrase she used to say when they were kids waiting for the school bus. "Don't forget the warm, Jess. Even in cold places." Shouldn't have hit so hard. But it did. Max sat quietly across the room, flipping through a book without really reading it. Jesse glanced up and saw his nephew watching him in the reflection of the office window. "She was nice," Max said after a while. Jesse looked at him. "Who?" "The girl. Brenda. She didn't ask anything. Didn't try to guess who you were." Jesse smiled faintly. "No, she didn't. She looked cold, though." Jesse exhaled. "Yeah, she did." Brenda wasn't thinking about Jesse Metcalf the next morning. She had laundry to do before work and her little sister's field trip form to sign. The heat in their apartment was shaky again, and her boots, after yesterday's snowstorm, were still wet inside. Her sister, Kara, drew on the back of cereal boxes at the kitchen table, whispering a story to herself involving cats, space pirates, and something called a glow toast. Brenda admired her imagination. She remembered what it was like to be that free, before bills, before expectations. She buttoned her coat and hurried out into the morning frost, not knowing her name had already traveled through one of the most exclusive networks in the city. Back in Jesse's world, something rare had happened. He was distracted. Meetings blurred. Emails went unread. His assistant, Leah, poked her head in around noon with a clipboard in one hand and a confused expression. "You're staring at that ticket again." Jesse didn't look up. "It was never supposed to leave my pocket." "Did you drop it?" "I don't know." He ran a hand down his jaw. "I didn't even realize it was gone until that girl handed it back to me." Leah stepped in. "What did she want?" "Nothing. No press? No favor? No selfie? Nothing," Jesse repeated. Leah tilted her head. "Then I suggest we find out who she is." Jesse hesitated. He didn't want to disturb the simplicity of what had happened. But something in him, something fragile, old, and restless, didn't want to let her vanish either. "Check with pavilion security," he said at last. "See if any cameras caught her walking in." Leah raised an eyebrow. "You want me to track a girl who returned something and asked for nothing?" "She reminded me of my sister," Jesse said quietly. "And Max hasn't stopped talking about her." Leah didn't argue. She knew Jesse well enough to recognize when something truly mattered. Brenda's second job was at a comic book store just off Mitchell Street. A quiet, dusty little corner with handmade signs and a cashier counter that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. She loved it there. Not for the pay, which was abysmal, but for the stories. For the kids who came in looking for dragons or robots or misunderstood villains in capes. Around 4 p.m., she was restocking the fantasy section when she noticed a shadow by the window. A boy stood outside. Hoodie. Familiar eyes. Brenda's heart skipped. She stepped out from the aisle just as the door creaked open and Max walked in, followed closely by Jesse. He looked different out of a suit. Less steel, more human. A navy sweater, dark jeans, and a quiet tension in his shoulders that suggested he wasn't used to doing things like this. Brenda blinked. "You again." Max lifted a book in his hands. "We just bought this. It reminded me of the Pigeon." Brenda laughed, surprised. "Let me guess. It has wings and an attitude." Jesse cleared his throat. "He insisted we stop by. Said this is the place." "The place for what?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "To say thank you," Jesse replied. Brenda looked from man to boy. "I thought we already did that." Jesse reached into his coat and pulled out a small, flat envelope. "I wanted to give you this." She opened it cautiously, only to find a bookstore gift card inside. Not flashy, not excessive, but enough to help her and Kara survive the month. "I didn't do anything," she murmured, trying to hand it back. "You reminded me why that drawing matters," Jesse said. "And you made my nephew smile." Brenda hesitated, then tucked it into her apron pocket. "Fine, but only because pigeons appreciate small gestures." Max grinned. Jesse smiled too, just faintly. "Do you ever take breaks?" Brenda tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I was hoping I could buy you a coffee." She blinked. This man, whose watch probably cost more than her rent, was asking her out? She should say no. Politely, firmly, but something in his voice wasn't polished. It was uncertain. She looked at Max, who gave her a small thumbs up. Brenda exhaled. "Sure, but I picked the place. And it better have decent muffins." They ended up at a tiny corner cafe with foggy windows and mismatched chairs. Jesse ordered black coffee. Brenda added 3 sugars and a swirl of cream to hers. They didn't talk about money, or jobs, or how opposite their worlds were. They talked about snow, about memories, about pigeons, and about what it meant to be tired of being unseen. When the waitress came to clear their cups, Jesse glanced at Brenda and said quietly, "You matter more than you think." Brenda's fingers tightened around her napkin. No one had said that to her in years. She didn't know what this was becoming. But somehow she wasn't afraid of it. Not yet. The following days felt strange. Not in a whirlwind, fairy tale sort of way, but quieter. Like something had shifted beneath Brenda's life, nudging it ever so slightly off its usual track. Jesse didn't bombard her with messages. He didn't send gifts or flowers. Instead, he texted Max's latest Pigeon sketch. This time, it was flying a kite, with a caption that simply read, "He says you'd approve." Brenda laughed out loud at the image, showing it to Kara, who replied dryly, "That pigeon has better posture than me." They weren't a couple. They weren't dating. But somehow, Jesse and Max had slipped into her life the way soft light filters into a dim room. Slowly, naturally, and impossible to ignore once it's there. And then, everything nearly collapsed. Brenda's shift at the comic store had just ended early. Her manager had to close for a leak in the back wall. She stepped out into the crisp air, cinching her coat tighter, when something underfoot crunched. Not snow, paper, a spiral notebook, slightly damp at the edges, lying just beside the curb. She picked it up. It had Max's name on the front, M. Culp, written in messy pencil. Inside were drawings, lots of them, pigeons in armor, a girl with glasses and a sword made of crayons, a flying bookmobile, and then near the back, a page that stopped her cold, a sketch of a ticket, her ticket, the lost one from the snow, with the words, "Don't forget the warm," carefully redrawn in the same childlike font. Brenda's throat tightened. On a sticky note inside the cover was an address. A building downtown, tall and glassy. No name, no label, but something in her gut twisted. It looked familiar. It looked expensive. She thought about texting Jesse, about handing it off quietly, but something stopped her. Instead, she took the subway. The building gleamed like polished ice, all glass and steel and quiet intimidation. Brenda stood outside it for several minutes, debating. She didn't belong here. She wasn't wearing heels or holding a portfolio. Her coat had a patch on one sleeve, and her hands were still smudged with marker from restocking shelves. But Max had dropped his drawings. That was reason enough. She stepped inside. The lobby was cathedral-like, all marble floors and cold lighting. At the front desk, a polished woman with a headset looked up and smiled professionally. "Can I help you?" Brenda cleared her throat. "I found this notebook. It belongs to a kid named Max. I think he might be connected to someone who works here." The receptionist took the notebook and flipped it open. Her expression changed instantly. "One moment," she said. Then she picked up the phone. Brenda fidgeted. The air smelled like citrus and money. After a few seconds, the woman looked up. "They're both upstairs. I'll let them know." "Both?" Brenda's stomach dipped. "Both who?" "Thank you," she said quickly, trying not to sound as panicked as she felt. "You can just give it to him. I don't need to." "They're in the boardroom," the woman said smoothly. Brenda froze. "Boardroom? No, no." She turned and walked out the door before anyone could stop her. And this time she didn't look back. That night, her phone lit up with 3 messages. "Max, did you drop off my notebook? Thank you. I owe you 3 pigeon stickers. Jesse, you came by. You left before I could see you. Are you okay?" Max again. "I drew you as a pigeon with glasses. Please don't be mad at Uncle Jess." She didn't reply, not because she was angry, but because she was disappointed, and mostly at herself. How could she have been so naive? She, Brenda Strong, girl with duct-taped shoes and 3 jobs, had let herself believe this man was just a guy in a coat who liked muffins and stories. Not a man with a title. Not a man with a boardroom. Not someone who lived in glass towers and moved through the world like it belonged to him. She curled up on the worn sofa, pulling the blanket to her chin, and shut her eyes. She didn't cry, but the silence hurt, because deep down, she wasn't sure if she'd just lost a connection, or if she'd imagined it all in the first place. Jesse stared at the empty hallway for a long time after she left. Max sat beside him on the couch in his office, swinging his feet off the edge. "You didn't tell her," the boy said quietly. "No," Jesse replied. "Why not?" Jesse rubbed a hand over his jaw. "I didn't want to scare her away. You kind of did anyway." Silence. "I think she thought you were just normal," Max added. "You know, like us." Jesse looked at him. "We're not." Max tilted his head. "Not in the money way." That made Jesse smile faintly. "She's not texting me back," Max murmured. "I even sent the pigeon with the tiny sword." Jesse sighed. "I'll try to fix it." How? He didn't know yet, but he couldn't let her slip away because of a misunderstanding. Especially not this girl, the one who gave without asking, who noticed warmth in cold places, who made Max laugh and made Jesse believe, just briefly, that maybe not everything from his past was meant to stay buried. The next afternoon, Brenda's shift at the store ended early again. She stepped outside just as a familiar figure appeared across the street. Jesse, wearing jeans, a hoodie, and snow in his hair, holding a paper bag. She stopped. He stepped toward her slowly. No driver, no assistant, no coat that cost more than her rent. "Don't panic," he said, holding up the bag. "There are muffins inside." Brenda blinked. "You tracked me down with muffins?" He gave a sheepish half-smile. "Max said muffins fix things." She crossed her arms. "They don't." "I figured that too. But I came anyway." "Why?" "Because I owe you more than silence. And you deserve honesty." Brenda didn't say anything. "I should have told you who I was," he said. "But with you, I wasn't Jesse Metcalf, the CEO. I was just Max's uncle. A man with a crumpled ticket in his coat pocket and no clue how to move on." Her jaw tensed. "You let me feel like we were the same. In the ways that matter," he said gently. "We are." She blinked hard, then slowly reached out and took the bag. "Muffins better not be blueberry." "Half blueberry," he admitted. Max couldn't decide. Her lips twitched. Not a smile. Not yet. But not anger either. Jesse stepped back, giving her space. "If you ever want to talk," he said, "I'll be the guy in the hoodie." Not holding the door too long. Then he walked away, and Brenda was left with the silence of her own heartbeat, and the scent of warm banana nut muffins pressed against her chest. The break room smelled like printer ink and stale coffee. Brenda had never stepped foot inside this part of the building before. Not through the grand lobby. Not past the security desk. She entered the way caterers did, through the service elevator and the back corridor with flickering lights. And yet somehow, the moment she opened the door to the break room, she felt more herself than she had in days. Max sat at the small round table in the corner, a stack of papers and crayons in front of him. His shoes dangled off the edge of the chair. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "You came," he said, like it was the only thing he'd been hoping for. Brenda stepped inside, clutching her sketchbook awkwardly under one arm. Well, I heard there was a pigeon emergency. He grinned and held up a page. It showed Sir Pigeon, sword in beak, riding a waffle into battle. She burst out laughing. Stephen, Jesse, stood near the coffee machine, silent but watching. He looked different today, tired in the eyes, but soft, as if he knew he'd almost lost something he didn't want to admit mattered. Brenda met his gaze for a second, nodded, then returned her focus to Max. The two of them spent an hour drawing. Max told her about Snail Commander Crumble and the League of Lost Socks. Brenda helped him design a villain made entirely of expired yogurt. And just before she left, he handed her a folded sheet of notebook paper. On the front, in wobbly handwriting, was written, "If you're mad at my uncle, that's okay. But I still want to know how the pigeon story ends." Brenda's throat tightened. She crouched beside him. "I'll tell you," she whispered, "but only if you promise one thing." Max blinked. "What?" "You keep drawing pigeons in capes. The world needs them." He nodded solemnly. As she headed for the door, Jesse followed her, but not too close. "I'm not asking for anything," he said gently. "Not forgiveness, not a reset. Just don't disappear." Brenda looked at him, her voice even. "Then don't give me a reason to." He nodded once. She left, but the paper Max gave her stayed in her coat pocket the entire walk home. She unfolded it 3 times before reaching her front door. And that night, for the first time in months, Brenda opened her sketchbook. Not for work, not for design ideas, but for herself. She began a new story, one about a pigeon with a burnt wing who couldn't fly, but still built a city with stories. 3 weeks later, Brenda stood outside a door with a sign that made her smile without realizing it. Youth Story Lab Pilot Room. Test Zone. Enter with imagination. The hallway walls were painted in soft yellows and sky blues. There were scuff marks on the floor and faint laughter behind the door. She opened it slowly. Inside, chaos reigned in the best way. Cardboard castles, crayon murals, snack wrappers, and a dozen children flopped in beanbags or at sketch tables. In the middle, wearing a construction paper crown, sat Max, commanding a group of dragon diplomats. The moment he spotted her, he jumped up. "Miss Brenda," a girl next to him chimed in. "The dragon forgot how to spell lasagna." Brenda dropped her bag near the entrance. "We'll retrain him after snack time." The kids laughed. Stephen stood quietly in the corner, sleeves rolled up, resetting a toppled stack of books. She met his eyes briefly. They didn't need to speak. Not yet. She stayed late that day, cleaning glitter off tables, reshelving crayons, refilling juice boxes. Stephen helped silently beside her, their rhythm wordless but familiar. Finally, as they both reached for the same stack of construction paper, their fingers brushed. Brenda pulled her hand back first. "You made this space," she said. Stephen looked around. "No, I built the walls. You made it matter." She tilted her head. "You're better with the kids than I expected." He smiled faintly. "I wasn't at first, but Max told me if I didn't stop acting like a fancy human, they wouldn't trust me." Brenda laughed. "Sounds about right." He leaned against the table. "You're staying, right?" She blinked. "In the lab. In whatever this is." Brenda looked around the room. Juice boxes, glue sticks, a pigeon sticker on the whiteboard. Then at him. "I don't do fancy," she said. "Or titles. Or empty promises." Stephen's voice was quiet. "Then we'll skip all of that." Silence. She didn't kiss him. Not yet, but she didn't leave either. That weekend, Max invited her to the soft launch of the Story Lab's Literacy Corner. No cameras, no press, just beanbags, cupcakes, and books arranged like treasure chests around the room. Stephen introduced Brenda as our story coach. Max added, "She's also the mayor of Pigeons." Someone handed her a badge with exactly that title scribbled in marker. After the crowd thinned, Stephen walked her to the corner of the block, hands in his pockets. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know, but I hope you'll keep showing up." She studied him for a moment, then reached into her pocket and handed him a folded napkin. On it was a new drawing, a pigeon and a snail holding maps. Stephen stared at it. "From you?" "No," Brenda said softly. "From the girl who found a lost ticket and accidentally found her way to the right people." He didn't answer, but he held the napkin like it was the only thing that made sense anymore. The first snowfall came gently. No wind, no storm, just soft flakes dancing between street lamps, settling like powdered sugar across the rooftops. Brenda stood at the reading room window, hands curled around a warm mug, watching the world turn white and slow. Behind her, Max was sprawled on a nest of pillows, gluing popsicle sticks into a precarious tower. "It's a pigeon perch/teleporter," he explained without looking up. Brenda smiled. "Obviously, all mayors need one." He looked at her. "Can we read after?" "You pick the book." The door creaked open. Stephen entered, scarf half undone, snow in his hair. He carried a paper bag and that crooked smile he never quite showed to anyone else. "Emergency delivery," he announced. Brenda raised an eyebrow. "Muffins again?" "Cookies." Max said it was a double chocolate kind of day. "Because I passed my math test," Max declared proudly, still balancing a glue bottle on his elbow. Stephen handed over the bag. The warmth bled through the paper. Brenda peeked inside. "This is dangerously close to bribery." He shrugged. "Bribery only counts if it's not delicious." She laughed. They didn't need labels. They didn't need to define what this was. But it was something. Quiet, consistent, woven between juice boxes, silly drawings, and nights that didn't feel lonely anymore. That evening, after the kids left and the lights dimmed, Brenda stood in the break room rinsing out cups. Stephen leaned against the counter beside her, sleeves rolled up, looking like he belonged nowhere and everywhere all at once. "I had a meeting today," he said. Brenda glanced at him. "Big one. Boardroom. Cold coffee. People pretending their graphs meant more than they did." She waited. "And the whole time, I kept thinking," he trailed off. "Thinking what?" "That I'd rather be here." Brenda swallowed. "You'd rather be in a room full of cardboard dragons and glue stick disasters?" "Yes," he said simply. She set down the mug. "I used to hate snow, you know?" He turned. "Why?" "Because when we were kids, snow meant the heater might go out, meant the bus might not come, meant the roof might leak. It made everything harder." Stephen was silent. "But now," she glanced out the window again, "now I kind of love it." "Why?" "Because it slows everything down, makes people notice what's warm." Stephen stepped closer, not looming, not pushing, just arriving. "And what's warm right now?" he asked softly. She looked up. "This," she said. "This is warm." That night, Brenda walked home with cookies in her bag and a drawing from Max tucked into her coat pocket. She unrolled it on the couch after Kara went to bed. It showed 3 figures, a dragon, a pigeon, and a girl with a scarf, holding a notebook like a sword. Above them, the real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they tell stories. She pressed the paper to her chest and let herself feel full. The next morning, on her desk at the foundation, sat a small box. No name, just a handwritten note. For your next chapter. SC. Inside, a full set of professional art markers, the kind she had stared at behind locked glass for years, the kind she never dared touch. Brenda exhaled. That day, she gathered the kids into a circle and told them a story about a pigeon who built a city out of lost things. When one girl asked, "Is it real?" Brenda smiled. The truest stories always sound made up. Stephen didn't say anything for a week. He didn't need to. They saw each other daily. Shared glances, inside jokes, cleanup shifts filled with quiet trust. But one evening, after a glitter bomb incident involving paper crowns and chaos, he paused beside her. "Dinner." She blinked. "You mean, not here?" He nodded. "Just us. No glue. No muffins. Just a table." A pause. She hesitated. What if it ruins what we have? What if it deepens it? Brenda looked at her reflection in the window, then at him. Okay. The restaurant was nothing fancy. A little spot near her apartment, warm and candlelit, the kind of place where no one cared who you were, only that you cleaned your plate. Brenda wore a soft green sweater with a frayed cuff. Stephen wore the coat she'd seen him in that first night. No driver, no assistant, just a man and a woman eating pasta and laughing about what pigeons might do in rush hour traffic. When the check came, she reached for her wallet. Stephen raised an eyebrow. "You'll offend Sir Crumble." She laughed. "Fine, but I'm leaving the tip." "Deal." Outside, snow began falling again. Slow, steady. They walked side by side, not touching, not rushing, just being. At her door, they paused. Stephen looked at her. "I don't want to rush anything. I know, but I want to keep walking in your direction." She touched the cuff of his sleeve. "Then don't stop." He leaned in and kissed her. Not fireworks, not frenzy, just presence. And it was enough. Later that night, Brenda curled up on her couch, warm under a blanket, and texted Max. "Sir Pigeon has a girlfriend now. Her name is Crumble. She's made of cheese." He replied in 5 seconds. "Crumble forever. Tell Uncle Jess I said thanks." Brenda smiled into the softness of her scarf. Outside, snow kept falling, and the world, for once, felt safe. The relaunch was never meant to be grand. No ribbons, no cameras, no speeches from people in suits pretending to care. Instead, it was dozens of kids running wild through yellow-painted hallways, their paper crowns slightly crooked and their shoes covered in glitter. Some wore hand-labeled badges that read things like Dragon Trainer, Mayor of Pigeons, or Snack Ambassador. Laughter echoed. Juice boxes spilled. Someone sang a theme song made entirely of meows. Brenda stood near the back window, clipboard in hand, her scarf tucked into a flannel shirt. Her fingers were covered in washable marker. Her heart felt oddly calm. Stephen entered late. On purpose. He didn't want to take the spotlight. He hadn't, in truth, since the day she stepped back into his world with nothing but honesty and a pigeon drawing. Max spotted him first and launched into a retelling of his day, involving a jellybean mutiny and a pigeon-led protest against nap time. Stephen just smiled and listened. Later, when most of the kids were busy drawing new flags for the Republic of Crayon Land, He made his way over to Brenda. "You made something real here," he said quietly. Brenda glanced at the kids. "You helped." "No," he said. "I just opened a door. You built the room." She looked at him then, really looked. His hands weren't in his pockets. His shoulders weren't tense. For once, he wasn't holding back. "And now?" she asked. He met her gaze. "I was hoping you'd keep letting me stay in it." She smirked. "Even if there are glue sticks everywhere?" He leaned a little closer. "I've learned to love the glitter." That evening, after the last cookie was eaten and the folding chairs were stacked, Brenda and Stephen stood outside under a flickering street lamp. The night was dry, but the sky hung heavy with snow. Stephen reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A napkin. Worn, laminated. Her napkin. The one she'd scribbled her number on months ago and handed to Max beside a plate of untouched salmon. "You kept it?" she asked softly. Max insisted. Said it's what started everything. Brenda touched it with 2 fingers. "He's not wrong." Stephen looked at her, not polished or careful, just present. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "All the time," she said. "What if you'd walked a different way?" "I didn't," she replied. "And that made all the difference." He stepped a little closer, cupping her hand gently. "What if," he began, voice husky, "we built more than just a story lab?" Brenda blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean something real. Not fast. Not fancy. Just honest. With crayons. And pigeons. And double chocolate cookies." She stared at him. "You're proposing with baked goods metaphors?" He smiled. "I'm proposing presence. And partnership. And showing up." She didn't answer with words. She leaned forward and kissed him. Firm, certain, grounded. Not to begin something fleeting, but to name what had already been growing quietly between them all along. 3 months later, they moved into a corner apartment with sun-warmed floors, slanted windows, and a tiny nook where Max set up the official headquarters of Sizzle and Crumble Publishing. Brenda still worked at the foundation, now as director of programs. Her new business card read, "Brenda Strong, story coach, chaos coordinator, mayor whisperer." Stephen took a step back from the corporate world. He still ran things, but now with longer weekends, slower mornings, and more frequent cookie-making nights with Max and Brenda at his side. Max smiled more, laughed easier, and never stopped drawing pigeons. One Sunday morning, the 3 of them sat at the kitchen table with steaming mugs and open sketch pads. Max read aloud from a new story he had just finished. The girl who told the dragon he didn't need fire to be brave. Brenda wiped her eyes before the last line. Stephen slid his hand into hers under the table. They didn't need titles. They didn't need headlines. They had stories and a home, built 1 page at a time.